Bravo, bravo. Very good.
Thank you.
In many ways, wonderful. You play the whole suite normally?
I haven't ever played the whole suite. This is the first time I'm playing the Prelude itself.
Ooh, wow.
I've played some of the other movements before, most of them actually.
And did you play other suites?
Yeah, I've played pretty much everything up to the fifth suite at some point in my life, yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's, I always say that if probably every cellist could claim this, that if music is something like our religion, then this suite is like a Bible. It's a book of books. And the same like Bible, there are hundreds, or probably more, different ways of interpreting it. And all of them are fine in their own way, except of two, in my opinion, but that's, again, very personal, like everything I say, of course. I always say that any great music, if it sounds ugly or boring, then something is wrong. Otherwise, everything goes. And the greater the music, the more it can take, so to say. And Bach, it doesn't come greater than this. So it's probably the most universal music altogether. And that's why it has such a unique place among many other great composers. But Bach somehow has its own places. Everybody agreed. Most of great composers, but not only philosophers, writers, artists, scientists, always love music. So there's great music, but there's Bach. It's really something about Bach makes it totally unique. And that's why there's all these heated debates and arguments about how to play Bach, so-called authentic way, which is a very important argument. In principle, it's just not only connected to Bach, but general. It's a question of general attitude. I personally believe that very important attitude in life in general is live and let live, which means you can disagree. It's perfectly normal, but not disrespect. And there's so many different ways of doing anything, of thinking, of dressing, or eating, or living, and playing Bach, or anything else. And it's wonderful. It's actually, I travel too much, but the advantage of it, I meet very different kind of people and see very different kind of places. And I believe very different cultures, very different ways of life. And I believe we if people would be more open-minded and tolerant, we could all benefit and learn from each other and enrich ourselves from different traditions, different cultures, different religions. Unfortunately, until now, majority of people didn't evolve to this level, and if you think about most of the terrible conflicts and wars and continuously all over the world, people kill each other by millions because of different god, different religion, or different ideology. And it's incredibly unfortunate. And so this whole discussions and arguments about how to play Bach or any other music, but Bach in particular, it's important and interesting. And I have more than 55 by now, probably, different recordings of Bach suites at home. I listen to all of them, and many of them many times. And you can always learn something, even if you feel completely different. You generally can always learn from any experience, but listening to any concert, any recording, music, you can learn, you can always discover something new, unexpected, fresh, interesting. Or you can learn from mistakes of others as well, so to say, in order not to repeat them. So it's a continuous, endless process, because reaching perfection in music is an illusion. Like in any art, it's like trying to reach the horizon. The closer you come, the more it goes away. And it's wonderful. It doesn't mean that one shouldn't try to come closer. But as long as you know, then you will never touch it. Then there is no frustration. Otherwise, people. So, Pablo Casals, whom I met, I was incredibly lucky to meet and play for him 2 months before he passed away. He was almost 97, 96 and a half. I hardly can believe it myself. Sometimes I think I'll wake up and. No, I have pictures even of. Not recording, unfortunately. Anyway, but what I mean, he had kind of rule in his life, which I tried without success to imitate, to every day to play Bach. And whenever I succeed, I feel sincerely, like they say, an apple a day keeps doctor away, but the Bach suite a day overture away, but it makes something amazing to you, really, in every way. Actually, it's the best exercise I find as well. I'm not, unfortunately, again, I don't imply that it's good, not at all. It's one of my weaknesses. I'm not into scales and exercises and whatever, which can be very useful, I know. But Bach suite today can make miracles. 2 even better.
They can be quite good exercises themselves.
Yeah, it's amazing. Anyway, but this, you see, my personal attitude about the whole idea of this so-called authentic way of playing Bach, I'm a great believer in authenticity. But I believe in authenticity of emotions. Whatever comes from the musician's, artist's heart is authentic to him at this particular moment. And that's what's most important. And, but the whole attitude about trying to go 300 years backwards, because it's actually happened to be almost exactly 300 years since he wrote it, around 1720. So I believe it's against the whole mentality of Bach and any other great geniuses like this, who were so much ahead of our time, so progressive. That's why Bach wasn't really appreciated as a composer during this time. He was much more famous as an organist. It took 100 years after his death for Mendelssohn to reintroduce his music in the concert halls and for humanity to catch up, so to say. And so, yeah, I sometimes even say something silly like, I think Bach is turning in his grave, knowing that musicians of the 21st century trying to go 300 years backwards. And then immediately in the same sentence I add, I might be completely wrong, because I never met Bach. Nobody did. And nobody should pretend that he knows the truth. I would say beware of people who preach the truth. Those are dangerous people. No, there's funny joke, probably it never happened, but there were two great ladies, interpreters of Bach, Wanda Landowska, Polish harpsichordist, and Rosalind Turek, pianist. Both were wonderful musicians, but very different. And apparently they had big argument about how to play Bach, and at some point one of them told to another, that's okay, you can play Bach your way, and I will play his way. Whatever that means. Because, you know, among many musician stories that I love, there's one with Otto Klemperer, great German conductor, who did a lot of Bach. There are many stories with him, even about Bach, many stories. One of them, for example, at the end of his life, somebody came to him and said, but you know, maestro, now they discovered that you're supposed to play Bach without vibrato. And, you know, he was, after stroke, he was paralyzed, he spoke like this. He said, 20 children and no vibrato? I have 6 children, so I sympathize with the idea. Anyway, but the other story is with a great singer, maybe I shouldn't even mention the name, but doesn't matter, who, the first rehearsal, some Bach or did something different in one aria. And Klemperer said, was machen Sie dort? What are you doing? And he said, oh, you know, maestro, last night in my dreams, I met Johann Sebastian Bach. And he told me, you're the greatest, and you can do this different than I wrote. And Klemperer said, no argument. Next day, another rehearsal, the same thing. Klemperer stops and, last night, in my dreams, I met Johann Sebastian Bach. He told me he doesn't know you. He never met you. And you know, we all should remember, none of us met Bach, and nobody should pretend that we communicate with him or any other great composers on a daily basis and know what he wanted and what he would like. That's the beauty of music. Then for me, music is a very living thing. See, it's continuously changing. Depends on everything. Depends on acoustics of the whole. Depends on the time of the day. Depends on your partnership or your own condition or whatever. It's dormant on paper, but the moment you start playing it, you wake up and bring to life. And that's why there's so many musicians playing the same music, recording it again and again, and it's wonderful. Most of the time, or sometimes. Still, the idea is wonderful. So, anyway, you know, Bach was so, obviously there's the facts that he was incredibly curious and interested in any advances and developments, like well-tempered clavier, and the suites he wrote for cello, not for the viola da gamba, and last suite for six suite for 5-string cello. So he always was. So I'm convinced that if Francois Tourt or somebody else would invent modern bow 100 years earlier, Bach would be the first to use it in experiment. So again, I personally don't agree with the idea of trying to imitate the way this music was played then. Because again, one can establish with modern musicological research more or less how it was played at the time, even though there are no recordings left, so it's still open for debate. But where I draw the line, it's when some people, not many, of course, go a step further and pretend that they kind of know how Bach would have liked it to be played today. I have this too much. I have a book somebody gave me as a present, and I found it recently. I hope to find time to read it again, because I read just a little part of it. It was much too complicated. It's a book by an American philosopher called Authenticities. It's about the whole issue, united with. It's a very complex philosophical essay about, but he makes very convincing argument. He says, the whole discussion is basically pointless and waste of time, because it's the same like saying that, for example, Herr Schmidt in Leipzig in 1720 decided to become shoemaker instead of airplane pilot. In 1720, Herr Schmidt didn't have this choice because there were no airplanes. Today, he might become airplane pilot, but still shoemaker. He didn't have choice. So Bach didn't have choice. He had his small orchestra with instruments of the time, and he did fantastically well with it. But if you would resurrect him, he said, and put him in every Fisher Hall in New York, with very bad acoustics, by the way, and offer him the choice of playing his music with his orchestra or with New York Philharmonic, maybe he would choose his orchestra, but maybe he would choose New York Philharmonic, and we will never know. Yeah. So it's very simple. So again, live and let live. It's wonderful, makes life very exciting and interesting. And people are different in many different ways. So, yeah. And it's wonderful that you play the way he suggested with scordatura. Yes, it's, I like it too. I unfortunately never learned it early enough. And now to change it, well, of course it's possible. I'm too busy, like 6 children, you know. And I play too much, too many different things all the time. So, yeah, but it's not that I'm against it. See, I think it's very good, and it gives different sound, different, so it's very good. What I would suggest for my personal taste, again, you see, it's very personal. That's the only thing I can share with you is how I feel. And what was lacking to me is the broader palette, broader dynamic range, and it's a question of intensity and different. See, it's a little bit too flat. You live in a rather flat country without too many hills and mountains, but you can imagine definitely there. Because you see, again, it's a question of attitude. I personally never play for so-called connoisseurs, you know, who know the music, because they don't even need me or you or anyone. They can just look in the score and enjoy it. I play always for people who maybe listen to this music for the first time, and you have to help them, to guide them through this beautiful landscape and journey, and otherwise they don't have chance to notice so many things and to enjoy and appreciate. And in order to do this, you have to really emphasize certain things. And again, I'm often criticized for exaggerating things. okay, and sometimes rightly so, I might be doing something too much. It's like everything else in life, it's the most difficult thing is to find perfect balance. But still, I find it's better to do too much than too little, in order to help people to join you on this journey. And then again, there's, but again, you have very few of these so-called habits, which I personally feel one has to be careful. Anyway, generally, habits are dangerous things in music. You get used to certain things and you don't realize and notice. And some of them can be good, but not always. And again, the traditions as well. It depends. There are some wonderful traditions which we all can learn from, and then there are some traditions which one should try to avoid. And there's the danger, not only with Bach, but with any great music. The danger is in young musicians, very often, long before they see the music, they heard so many times a certain way of, like, and then you pre-programmed, and you look at the music, but you already see what is in your head. It's very dangerous. That's why I always say, it's a very good idea to play with music, even the things which you know and play hundreds of times by memory. Because you think you know, then again, okay, Bach, it's different, because in the suites, he didn't write practically any indications. At the time, composers had faith in performers, you know. Later, they became much more suspicious and started writing much more. But no matter how much they write, still it's impossible to indicate everything. And here we come to other musician stories, which I could basically summarize my whole, I wouldn't call it philosophy, it's but just attitude towards music making with two musician stories. There are many, but two of them which I like very much, which seem to be contradictory. But in reality, in my opinion, they're just complement each other. One is with great Russian composer and pianist, Sergei Rachmaninoff. Last night I had pleasure to play 3 of his beautiful pieces. He was very famous as a pianist, of course, and he played Beethoven concerto with orchestra, and young conductor before first rehearsal wanted to be nice and ask him, "Maestro, please tell me anything you like, I will do anything the way you like." And Rachmaninoff said, "But you know, I'm not an expert on Beethoven, so why don't we just play the way it's written, which usually is the best way." And those experts, you know, who are holier than Pope, so to say, know better than Beethoven himself. I'm always very suspicious of when you're trying to improve or correct on such a great music. The only thing you can do is make it worse. You know, sometimes, particularly after Bach concert, I play as often as I can, evening of only Bach solo. And people somehow, some people, expect it boring. And if it's not, they're kind of surprised, pleasantly surprised. They come back so excited. "Wow, this was so wonderful. You made this music so wonderful." Wait a minute. The only thing I try desperately to do is to spoil this music as little as possible. To pull it down not too much, but to instead try to bring people a little bit closer. Because no matter how hard we try, there is no way we can achieve the level of greatness of not only Bach, but any great music we play. So, yeah, it's just a question of realizing. So even the same, my idea of arrangements, which I like very much, and I play a lot of arrangements, but my idea of arrangement, if you, okay, there are different things. There are arrangements like, let's say, Liszt made arrangements of Paganini caprices. Mm-hmm. Or, okay, Liszt was, Paganini was phenomenal personality and violinist. But as a composer, Liszt was on a higher level, so he kind of improves his music in a certain way. But okay, when he does, for example, Schubert Lieder, that's another, completely another story. But then again, it's not arrangements, it's basically his own composition on the theme of Schubert. So it's again, it's different. He was a great composer himself. But when one tries to, when one takes great music and makes arrangement, tries to improve on it by changing something. In my opinion, most of the time, it's exactly opposite. So my idea of arrangement is to try to not to change a single note if possible. And if you have to change too much, then it's better not to play it. It's a question of selecting only music which really fits your instrument, even if it's written for another instrument or voice, and find maybe different lighting, different way to present it, but changing, I don't believe it helps. So, okay, but yeah, about these traditions, yes. The other, no, I interrupt myself because the Rachmaninoff story is one thing, but the opposite story is with young Arturo Toscanini, great conductor, who came supposedly to old Giuseppe Verdi and told him, "Maestro, I'm sorry, I know you didn't write, but if you don't mind, in this place I really feel like poco accelerando." And Verdi said, "Of course, Arturo, no problem. But and here I really would like to make them in the end." No problem, Arturo, no. And here, if you don't mind, maybe poco written." And Verdi said, "Well, Arturo, it's all in the music." Because there are certain things between the notes, so to say. As I said, no matter how much some composers try to indicate, it's impossible to so one has to be very faithful to the text. That's the first step, no matter what you play. But at the same time, very faithful to the spirit of music and being able to read between the lines, this expression also in our case, between the notes. And that's what brings music a lot to life and it makes the difference at the end of the day. So, yeah, if we go back to our prelude, more concrete, first of all, yeah, as I said, you don't have too many habits or intentions even, I don't know, but it didn't sound to me like you were very much into so-called authentic way of playing Bach. But certain things, because, you know, again, it's a question of different bow, different techniques, so to say, which they used. And we have, you know, once, I'm jumping from one thing to another. I remember I played Bach suites in Madrid. And then we had dinner together with, again, maybe I shouldn't mention names, but very famous conductor who does exclusively old music and old style, which is wonderful actually, and he's a wonderful musician. There, you see, there are many fantastic musicians who play Bach or any other music completely different way than I feel it. And I enjoy listening, and so but unfortunately, there's as well many not so good musicians who kind of hide behind this, you know, putting the wig and makeup and that's something else. And because, you know, there is such a thing as Baroque music, of course, and it's wonderful when it's played in Baroque instruments, in Baroque styles. But for me, to call Bach Baroque composer, I find it insult to Bach. It's trying to make him much smaller than he was. You know, I mean, I just can't even understand how anybody, I mean, if you just take Sarabande from this suite, or Goldberg variations, you should probably know, yes? The 25th variation, the slow. I mean, it's a modern music. It's unbelievable to imagine it was written 300 years ago. It's amazing. If you call this Baroque music, then, you know, I'm closer to Japanese emperor than this to Baroque music. It's just general, it's unconsciously people, in order not to feel so insignificant and small compared to great geniuses, they try to pull them down closer to earth, put them in a frame, put them on the wall, and label them. This is Baroque composer, this is you know, romantic, this is this, and this is that. And when people accuse me of playing Bach too romantically, I always take it as a compliment. I think he was the greatest romantic of his time. Depends what it means, of course. Because, of course, I don't imply that one should play Bach the same way you play Schumann or whatever. Not at all. But, you know, the idea that Bach was this intellectual composer who 18 hours a day was writing fugues, he had 20 kids. And it's known that he had bad temper, actually. And I'm sure he liked good wine and good beer, and he was very human. And he had many sides to him, and it's all in his music. And as Pablo Casals said, there is no emotion known to human beings which is not in this music. It's just a question of being able to dig deep enough and to express it. Or, like Vladimir Horowitz said, that for him all music was romantic. I kind of agree with this. Because if by playing romantic, it means playing with feelings and emotions. And people in 18th or 17th century had probably more feelings and emotions than nowadays. They were not, you know, influenced by computers and all kind of other modern things, which I don't imply that it's like everything else. It has modern times had many advantages and many disadvantages. It's a question of just being able to choose positive side. So about this dinner in Madrid, you see, I'm jumping from one thing to another. It's too early in the morning for me, sorry. Anyway, this gentleman, he knew, of course, that by coincidence I was playing Bach the same night in different halls at concerts. It was the same manager who arranged this concert, so we had dinner together. And he started, I didn't want to have any discussion or anything, but he started kind of, went on the defensive and started explaining why he thinks Bach should be played in a regional way. Because he said, you know, if I buy old house, I think it has to be renovated in a regional style, except of plumbing and electricity, he said. And here I couldn't help, and I told him, if you already such a purist, then why don't you leave the plumbing and electricity original as well? If you agree that there was some progress made in certain ways. Then there is nothing wrong about exploring and using modern bow and other advantages of our time. There are many things which people kind of lost already or losing the certain art of making things like artisans used to make by hand. Yes, that's a problem of our times. But there are many advantages, and at least it's like, you know, people who, in order to, they're so against polluting, which is, I totally agree. I drive electric car, actually, Tesla. But so they refuse to drive altogether or use a car. I mean, that's not the solution. You see. And the same with internet or any modern advances. You can find incredible advantages to this. And of course, there are plenty of, probably more garbage and all kind of terrible things. Same like in television. I came from Russia, you know, to the West, and I saw in America, for instance, 782 channels. And I just couldn't believe it. We had 2 channels at my time. Yeah. There was a joke on the first channel. There was 8 hours long speech of propaganda speech of communist leader. And if you switch to the second channel, there was a soldier with machine gun saying, "Don't you like the first channel?" That's the choice we used to have. Okay, those times are long gone, and you probably maybe heard about it. But anyway, what I'm trying to say, but still, out of the 782 channels, 720 probably, or whatever, more, are garbage and really. But still, there was incredible, relatively speaking, choice of interesting and enlightening things. The same on the internet or anywhere else. It's just a question of being able to select right things. The same with music. And no, I'm talking too much, but then again, it's better than trying to play now. But no, see, these certain things, I don't know what edition you use, but no matter what edition you use, I'm sure there are no pauses between notes which you did sometimes with the 8 notes, quite a bit. It's again some kind of tradition, and I always say he could easily write, and he did. He or any other great composers, when they wanted, they wrote exactly what they wanted. Why should we pretend that we know better? Just because maybe at the time, because of certain limitations of technical facilities or instruments and bows they used, became traditional. You know? I personally don't agree with it. Then again, as I said, I might be wrong. But main thing is, it's question of certain intensity and direction, and different intensity. Depends on the tonality, depends on the development. And it's for me, main problem, or from my point of view, the main advice I could give you about it is to develop more. Altogether, see, it's a question of colors. You know, as I said, I keep repeating because that's the most important thing I did in my life. I have 6 children, beautiful children, all ages. Youngest is 6 years old, then 8 years old, 12, 16, and so on. Anyway, but when children start coloring, you know, they get this set of 6, sometimes 12 colors, and usually that's where it stops. But the great painters, they mix their own colors and make many different shades of the same color, and that's what makes it much more refined and sophisticated painting than children's coloring. The same in music. We have to continuously try to develop more colors, more different vibrato, different kind of sound, which comes very often from right hand, even more than left, both. But people always, when people talk about technique, it's usually around it. But the technique of the right hand, and it's quite mysterious actually. Again, I don't know much about it, that's why I don't teach. You know? People ask me, how do you hold your bow? I said, ask me something easier. Anyway, who cares how you hold the bow? What's important is what comes out.
Yeah.
You
as
can
long
hold,
as you make the
exactly,
good sound.
exactly. It's not a beauty contest, you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I see on television or pictures my bow can say, ew, gosh. And then we see some people beautiful here. At the end of the day, what comes out? You see, I was incredibly lucky. I always say I'm the luckiest cellist in the world. And again, anybody can claim it. It's very subjective. If he feels this way, then he is. But I do have some objective reasons, because it happened to be, as unbelievable as it is, that was Pitigorski, my second grade teacher, who noticed this. And I'm the only cellist who had this privilege, in my opinion, to study with both Rostropovich and Pitigorski. And for me, both of them were not just of the greatest cellists, but personalities and teachers, and so I was unbelievably lucky. But both of them, why I'm mentioning this, they had very similar, strangely enough, approach to teaching. Even though they were very different, but the approach to teaching was very similar and very different from usual teachers, you see. They never, almost never, Rostropovich hardly ever took cello, but mostly he was sitting in the second piano. He played fantastic piano. Pitigorski did, but actually with me, not really. But then I saw, and you can find actually now on YouTube more and more appear some video recordings of his teaching and playing. Highly recommended. Where he takes cello and shows. But in any case, even when he did, he didn't really speak about, neither of them spoke much about cello playing as such. Yeah. They never tried to make, unlike some teachers, unconsciously maybe, trying to make small copies of themselves. They never insisted you playing the same bowings, the same fingerings, the same way like that. They could suggest it, of course, but because nobody needs, you know, when I was, when I played the Tchaikovsky competition, it was before I started studying with Rostropovich, actually. But one of the jury members in an interview, trying to give me biggest compliment I could imagine, actually, called me this something like second Rostropovich of the future. But then if you think about it, I never wanted to be second Rostropovich because nobody can be second. Nobody needs second Rostropovich or fifth Rostropovich or 27th Rostropovich. You know, when you go to Florence, for example, if you've been to Florence, beautiful city, I hope you'll have a chance. And you see the real original statue of David. And then in every kiosk you can buy copy, any size you want, depends how much you pay, small, little, bigger. I mean, this is...
It's not the same.
It's not the same, no. So, we all are unique, and I want to be first and only Maisky, not second of whatever, Rostropovich. And they, luckily, were evolved enough and open-minded enough of not trying to make you imitate them. They approach teaching from completely different side, direction. They try to help young cellists to figure out what the composer wanted to say and how he personally sees the final destination, so to say. And how you get there, it's irrelevant. It's you know, there are many different ways to come here. I wanted to walk here this morning because luckily it's not raining, it's nice weather, and it's so beautiful and so close. I mean, but I was a little late and there was a car already waiting, so they drove me here, which is kind of silly. But again, I would have walked, of course, different way. And it doesn't matter which way you take. The important thing that you come to the right place. That's what's important. And it's like kitchen in the restaurant. If you go to a good restaurant, luckily they don't let you in the kitchen. It's better not to see. What's important, what comes on the table, how it looks and how it tastes, of course, the final result. And yeah, so, and then if you gift it enough, they were of course very lucky in a way to have very high level students who already played cello very well. So they didn't have to really show much, although sometimes they would give certain advice. Anyway, but so the idea was that you find your own way if you know where you're going. And it's very important attitude, and that's why I tend to give some master classes, and people start asking me these kind of questions. I don't know much anyway about cello playing. I'm kind of half amateur, which again is disadvantage and advantage, depends how you look at it. Because in Russian, as you probably speak Russian. Oh my God. No, you don't? Okay, doesn't appear, you're too young. Fine. Anyway, but what I mean, the amateurs, it's music lover. And I still love music after all these years, very much. So it's a compliment in a way. The other hand, okay, I don't know much about cello playing, so I wouldn't dare to give you advice about how to do what. There are some other wonderful teachers who can help you much better with this. That's why, you know, everyone, I generally believe that we all have qualities and we all have limitations. It's perfectly normal. There are very few people who can do everything, whatever they try, on the highest level. For this is not enough just to be gifted, talented, whatever. You have to have a combination of talents which basically come close to being a genius. There are very few geniuses. There are many people who think they are geniuses, and that's where the problem starts. And so the most important talent or quality is to figure out what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. Mm-hmm. And not to do things which you can't do justice to do your best. That's why I don't conduct, for example, like most of my colleagues, which I would love to, of course. Or don't teach in normal sense of this word. Even though when people, young cellists come backstage after a concert and ask, do you give lessons? I will say, I just now did. And if you learn something, great. And if not, I hope maybe at least enjoyed something or some other people did. Because I feel that the best way I can share everything what I feel about music, what I know about music, love about music, is through music itself by playing. And other colleagues of mine can do much better teaching, or some can do both. So everyone should stick to what he does best. That's why keeping baby children, because it's a joke, of course, but if you would see my children, you couldn't argue with this. And in my spare time, I still play cello. And even then, repertoire-wise, for example, I don't play certain kind of music if I don't feel like I can do justice to the music. And it's not that I don't like it. Of course, some I don't play because I don't like it enough to be in love with it when I play. Or others just I don't, I criticize often, rightly so, not playing enough contemporary music, even though my standard answer is when people ask me to play modern music, I said, of course, I play Bach. Okay, it sounds like a joke, but every joke has grain of truth in it. But in Russian, we used to say every joke has grain of joke in it. If it's a good joke, most of it is true. So I mean it seriously as well. But okay, that's something else. But I try to enlarged my repertoire, and I did play some contemporary music. I did quite a bit during these studies in Moscow with Rostropovich, and still try, but not enough. And it's one of my many weaknesses. But then again, I have this explanation which trying to justify, which again is only partly true. Of course, I am probably too lazy and not organized enough to find enough time to do it properly. But still, I believe whatever music you play, you have to try to do it the best way possible. But if you play Bach or Schubert or Mozart, Beethoven, and so on, and if you don't play your best, nobody in their right mind will, for a second, think that Bach or Schubert are not good composers. Everybody will blame the interpreter. But if you play contemporary music, and if you happen to be famous or well-known or whatever musician, then the danger is people, and don't you do your best, people might think, wait a minute, this is a famous musician, so the music must be not good. So it's even more responsibility to play contemporary music the best way possible, 120%. And it's difficult, like different language, you see. I wish I could try to speak to you Latvian now, but I remember a few words, even though I was born here, and that's it. Sorry. So it's just a question of mastering this language, which takes time, talent, and experience, and so on. And so I find it's better not to do certain things instead of doing it halfway. Because for me, quality was always more important than quantity. So, anyway, I went again much too far from the C minor prelude. But I think, again, we can, of course, go through this prelude now, note by note, and it will take the rest of the day or of our life or whatever. Anyway, but because, as I said, it's endless process. But everything what I'm trying to say, I think it's very important in a certain way. I hope you retain some of it. And when I studied with Pizzigorsky, for example, with Rostropovich, I spent 4 years in Moscow. But he was gone most of the time. He was traveling and playing so much. And then I spent 4 months only with Pizzigorsky. But it was so intense. Actually, I'm sure I spent more time with Pizzigorsky in 4 months than Rostropovich in 4 years. And every day, or almost every day, I played for Pizzigorsky a different piece. Everything I could, and many things which I couldn't really play, but it didn't matter, because he just tried to give me certain ideas, food for thought, which I still feel, in a way, I'm digesting, 40 years later, or more than 40, what I'm talking about, 47 years later, actually. It was 1974 when I was with him. Incredible. Time flies. Anyway, for you, it's eternity.
Yeah,
yes.
That's a long time
Yes.
for me.
Yes, of course. Anyway, but what I'm trying to say, that, there are certain things which, that's why I'm trying to share with you, and which maybe seem to be not at all connected with Bach's C minor prelude or music in general, but in a way I hope it will help you to reflect on certain things and try to see certain attitudes, certain ideas about music making and life in general, which are all interconnected, you see, because, but anyway, still, we already unbelievably are out of time. But again, unfortunately, you see, that's, when I was studying with both Rostropovich and Pizzigorsky, it was understood, it was never a written rule, but that we all were present continuously in the class when everybody else was playing. Because you can learn sometimes, I learned a lot from other lessons just listening, even more than when you're playing yourself, because you're too involved, and from the outside you, yeah. So whatever I was trying to say is, it would be just as important for, I believe, somebody is going to play Schumann, Adagio Allegro, and Shostakovich concertos. Very different music than Bach, but I could repeat myself again and again. But I did this not because I think it's very important what I was trying to. And you were the first one, so I kind of stopped talking about general things. But okay, maybe we can still spend a little more time. I mean, the beginning already. Okay, you started very reserved, which is okay, even though I think it's a little bit more substantial. So there's more substance to this, even first note and octave. But then, for me, problem was then it's certainly one way of starting, but then it's a question of where it goes and how it develops. It stayed a little bit too much in the same limited range of dynamic range and color range and emotional range. First part, which he was still in C minor, trying to go a little bit away, but here we come to the point, turning point. So it's much more intense than. Going back to it. I mean, don't pay attention to the quality of my playing now. I'm totally, Steve didn't even tune my cello properly. And it's much early in the morning. Anyway, that's not the point. I shouldn't show because it's recorded for posterity, but it will give pleasure to some of my colleagues to criticize me, so that's fine. Great, I'm very happy. But I hope you get the point. I'm just trying to show certain. It's only one way you can do it differently.
There are so many possibilities.
But the idea is to find this different direction, different outlook, different intensity, and different colors. It's not at all that flat. And the same in the rest of the Prelude. And there you can find the thematic element and show them a little bit more, because it comes in between them, and I personally think it's a good idea to emphasize this wherever it develops later. And again, the same thing. It's a question of certain development. You see, because there's clear line and it goes up and down. Then comes the culmination and the real culmination, and you clearly can make it more. There's one thing maybe I should share it with you, but I don't know, probably. There is this chord in the Prelude which comes the same in Allemande, but goes completely different direction. It's the only time which happened to me, luckily. I'm kind of start getting little complexes from one of my colleagues. I don't know if you should mention his name, a wonderful cellist, a good friend of mine, but he told me recently, and he's quite a bit younger than me, 11 years younger, who says, oh, you know, I can't play Bach anymore. I used to play only number one, number three, but now only number one, because he's problems, afraid of memory problems. That's why I have music on my cello case. Just kidding. No, so normally I still play all six and never had major problems. But once I played in Hamburg, but it was a very special concert because it was in a big cathedral, and the organist of cathedral was a big admirer of my late brother, who was organist, who died very early in a car accident, unfortunately. And his dream was to share concert with me. So I played 3 suites, and he played in between number 1, number 4, Prelude and Fugue, and before number 5, in the beginning of the second half, another Prelude and Fugue on the organ. And I was listening, I was there, and you know, my brother was a very important person in my life. He was a fantastic musician. He introduced me to Bach altogether, and my first edition of Bach suites he gave me when I was 11 years old, with dedication. Anyway, what I mean, it was, and he tragically was killed in a car accident at the age of 39, so it was emotionally very special for me. So it didn't help my concentration. So when I played number 5 suite, I was kind of a little bit an automatic pilot. Yeah. And I always knew that there is this danger, but I never thought it could happen to me. It did. I played Allemande, and I suddenly realized I'm back in the Prelude. Oh! And I desperately tried to figure out within a few seconds how to get out of there, but it's completely different. Oh my gosh. I keep playing and I said, oh, it's impossible. The only thing I could do is continue to play the whole Prelude, which of course is ridiculous. So I stopped. I said, take 2, and I start Allemande again. Can happen. Nothing to be really ashamed of. You know, there's a story, I don't know, talking too much again, but doesn't matter, I hope. During the Tchaikovsky competition in 1962, it was the first time cellists were participating in Tchaikovsky competition. One of the, you probably heard, wonderful cellists who, at the end of the competition, finally shared 3rd prize with Natalia Gutman, who's a great friend of mine, whom I admire very much, always did. It was Mikhail Homitzer. He was one of the cellists. He was very young then, they all were very young. And apparently in the 2nd round, I don't even remember what piece it was, he had complete memory blackout. He stopped and walked off the stage. And there was a representative Ministry of Culture who, you know, just shook him and threw him back on stage because Soviet artists don't walk off stage. And he came and played again and was fine. But they didn't want to let him to the finals because of this. And then it was Pitigorsky, great Pitigorsky, who had nothing to do, it was not his student, he didn't have any interest, but he got up and said, wait a minute, what's going on here? We all realized that he's very good cellist, very gifted, and certainly deserves to be in the finals. So he had a memory problem. Who of us didn't? And he started talking one by one to them. He said, Pierre, to Fournier, don't you remember this Lalo concerto in Marseille? I was in the audience. I thought you'll never get out of the second movement. It was such a mess there. And you, Gaspar, because said, oh, this concert. And me, he said, I'm most famous for this thing. It happened to all of us. And this young cellist plays in front of this jury, this huge program with so much nerves and tension. So he got memories. Shame on you. And they finally led to the finals and he got third prize. So, you know, it can happen. It's nothing. We're all humans, hopefully, luckily. So, yeah. But be careful. It goes different directions. You know, there's this big chord. You'll find it eventually. I don't want to waste time. It's one of these tricky places, but anyway. And again, memories is, some people have better memory than others and play or conduct everything from memory, which is impressive and fine, I guess. But it's not the most important thing. You know, when people ask me, do you play everything by heart? I always say, I play everything with heart. Sometimes with music and it's all without. This is not the important. It's important to play with heart. By heart is. So there is a joke about some conductor who did everything from memory usually, and then one concert suddenly with a score. And his best friend came backstage and said, hey, you're losing it. Yeah, I was learning the next program. It's a silly joke. But you know, some people have better memory than others, but this is not the most important quality. Of course, Bach eventually, if you, like most of the things, if you really play it enough and devote enough time, it comes automatically sooner or later, and you play without music. And it's true, and for cellists particularly, since we face the audience, there's this music stand in between. It doesn't help to your connection, even physical, but it's some kind of barrier in between. That's why when I have to use music, like cello music, I try to use as low as possible, discrete, small stands. But at the end of the day, that's not the most important thing, of course. So anyway, I'm sorry. We have to stop at some point, but I hope you got the idea, and among many other ideas which we could speak about, but maybe some other time.
Perhaps.
Yes, I hope so. All the best, and it was nice meeting you, nice listening to you.
Thank you for listening.
Pleasure. Thank you.